Joining us in the Beat studio is lawyers. This is very serious radio right now. Go ahead and introduce yourselves briefly and then tell us the office that you guys are with.
I'm Emily Shook. I'm the first assistant prosecuting attorney for the domestic violence unit at the Greene County Prosecuting Attorney's Office.
John, pressure's on.
And my name is John McCaskill. I am a senior assistant prosecuting attorney with the domestic violence unit at the Greene County Prosecutor's Office.
And I'm Julie Wilson. I'm a radio DJ. Less words there with it. You guys, though, in on a rather serious note, we're talking about domestic violence. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We partner with the Harmony House to raise awareness there. And I thought you guys should pop in to talk about the new prosecuting team / unit that Greene County has formed. Not so much new, it's been around for a few months, but it's going to solely focus on domestic violence cases, which is tricky knowing that Greene County is the, third in the state for domestic violence cases. Yes. Walk us through the formation of this unit and why it's critical to the county.
So I think that the formation of the unit really got started with the formation of the Family Justice Center. Greene County is the only location in Missouri that has a Family Justice Center. And what that is a partnership of existing resources for domestic violence victims. We have a building that houses 9 different partner agencies. So it includes like the Children's Division, the Greene County Sheriff's Office, the Springfield Police Department, Borough Behavioral Health, Harmony House, the Victim Center, and some other partners. And all of those are there together to work to provide services to domestic violence victims. Once that got started, we realized that we could work better with those efforts if we had a dedicated domestic violence unit in the Greene County Prosecutor's Office.
There's 6 lawyers in that,
yes.
Correct? Knowing the amount of domestic violence that's happening here, specifically in Greene County, is that enough? Is that enough lawyers to handle all those cases?
Well, we could always have more. Anytime that you are working in prosecution, you are always dealing with fewer resources than what you could really utilize out in the private sector, what would be available. But I think it is a really good allocation of resources to do what we need to do. And we also have some great support staff.
Walk us through what it's been like in the last few months that you guys have formed this unit. Have you seen an increase in cases and prosecution, more people, victims, primarily women, I would assume, in these cases, coming forward to get their turd partners off the streets? That's not a legal term, turd partner.
I haven't used that term in court yet, but I want to quite often. I may start doing that going forward.
Yeah, free of charge.
So in terms of the actual numbers, I don't have the data in front of me. I've talked to some of our law enforcement partners, and it's kind of a catch-22 of, well, if reports are up, is that a good thing? Does that mean people are more comfortable with reporting? Do they know that the resources are there because we know it's happening, and sometimes we just don't see it or hear it, or people are afraid to report? Or if numbers are down, does that mean that things are working and we're actually doing a good job? So just going based on the number of reports, it's kind of you can look at it, I think, through both lenses. I think that we are certainly doing a really good job of actually having that whole kind of wraparound services that focus on our first step for anything, whether they're talking to us, talking to the police department, talking to Burrell, is just getting them inside the building, letting them know that these services are available for them, and then they have the option of choosing the direction they want to go. Whenever they step into the door, there's no requirement that they speak with every agency. They can come in and say, I want nothing to do with the prosecutor's office, and we won't even know that person is actually inside of the building.
Oh, so that's interesting. So a victim or a survivor, I guess, I don't know what the proper term would be, can come forward, utilize all the services within the Family Justice Center, and not seek prosecution.
So in terms of seeking prosecution, that's kind of a different thing. But in terms of actually like speaking with our office or making a report to law enforcement, something could have happened, the night before, the month before, the year before, whenever it may be, and they may at that time be ready to seek an order of protection, which is something civil. So they may come in and say, I need these kinds of services, or I just need shelter, or I want to talk to Harmony House. I'm not ready to get the whole police involved and get all that. All those kinds of services, because it's a lot. It's a lot to go through. The idea in creating the Family Justice Centers were originally, whenever survivors would report domestic violence, they may want one service. They may want to not really talk to the police, but hey, they need to solve their housing issues. They may need to file for a divorce. they may need childcare, they may need all these other services, and they would have to keep constantly being told, well, you've got to go to this building for that and this building for that, and actually you're at the wrong building, you need to go to this building. And so the idea of creating the Family Justice Center was so that it would be a one-stop shop. You could go in, speak to a navigator, which is somebody who directs you in the right direction of where your needs are, to say, okay, sounds like today you're coming in for this. Let's help you do that, get that problem sorted out. If you want to seek the other services, they are right here for you, but you're not forced in one direction or forced to tackle 100 problems at once when you've just gone through, something very traumatic that's hard to juggle just one thing.
And I want to talk about, you mentioned the comfortability to get someone to come forward. I find that to be a really fascinating thing, just the psychology of getting to the point knowing that it takes the average person 7 to 9 times leaving before they stay gone. Are you starting to see, and I know that's only been newly formed, but obviously you've been prosecuting these crimes for a good while, are you starting to see, as we talk about domestic violence more and more, are you starting to see more victims feel more comfortable saying, hey, this crap's going on and I need help type thing? Or is it still very...
Every person is in a different situation. And you hear us use the word victim instead of survivor, and that's because it tracks with our statutes in Missouri. It all refers to victims, and so when we're in court, we're going to use the term victim. But whether we're talking about somebody who's early in the process of learning about domestic violence, learning about the services that are available to them, contemplating making changes in their lives, changes in their relationships, or people who have been dealing with it for a longer period of time and really are ready to make a move, it's super individualized.
Yeah.
And that's something that our unit is really trying to take into account, is we don't treat everybody the same, but instead trying to meet them where they are, figure out what they're ready for, what services they're most interested in, and then assisting them in making the changes that they're ready to make.
Do you find a lot of these people realize they're in abusive situations? Like, I think sometimes it doesn't really dawn on them. Perhaps they grew up in an abusive household, or they've seen it play out so many times that they're used to it, and it doesn't really click. Oh, this isn't normal.
So that's something that science tells us when we do research into how these relationships get started, is that people who witness it think that it's more normal. So if they saw it growing up, they may then emulate those same relationships in their adult lives. And so some people don't know. I can remember one time speaking with a specific victim and talking to her, and she said, this violent incident, that's the only time this has ever happened. It's the first time, and I don't think it'll happen again. And I was thinking, okay, I'm not so sure. I hope that that's the case. But as we started talking, I said, well, you had these phone numbers. Did you call those phone numbers for the services that we're talking about? And she said, no, I couldn't, because he took the pamphlets. And then later in that same conversation, she apologized to me for being emotional and said, I'm not on my meds because he can't get prescriptions. So I get the prescriptions and he takes my meds. So I'm sorry, I'm so emotional. I would do better if I was on my meds. And I stopped her and I said, okay, those things are abusive. It's not physical violence.
Throw the whole ass man out. Throw him out.
Yeah. So sometimes people don't realize, because to them, an abusive relationship is one where they're getting hit.
Right, and I think in this area, that's what we're taught abuse is. You got a black eye, all those things.
And it's not just that. It can be isolation, keeping you away from your family, from your friends, making it so that you don't have a support system. It can be financial, not giving you access to funds, putting you on an allowance, not allowing someone to work so that they have adequate resources to make their own decisions. It can be sexual violence in a relationship, forcing people to do things that they don't want to do, that they're not comfortable with. And so all of that is part of the spectrum of what encompasses abusive relationships. And yeah, some victims, when they come in, they don't realize that they're even in a dangerous situation, or that they're in a situation that isn't okay. And so we try to start with education, and telling people what healthy relationships look like too.
When you talk about education, do you think, I've thought about this frequently, do you think TikTok has helped more people realize oh shit, this isn't normal?
I think it can.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of resources that are available on social media where you see women providing each other support. And we are dealing predominantly with female victims in our cases.
What's the stat? 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men, though I think the crimes are probably different.
Yeah, when we talk about intimate partner violence or abuse in relationships, those are the stats. So it isn't just female victims, but as far as what we see from law enforcement referrals, it's primarily female victims and male offenders.
And that's so interesting. The domestic calls, I know for law enforcement, those are often the most dangerous to go through.
Yes.
Are those also the most dangerous to prosecute? I don't know if those correlate or if there's a parallel.
Fortunately, being in the role of a prosecutor doesn't tend to be super dangerous. I mean, there are things that we do to try to stay safe, but we do know that that's true for law enforcement officers, that domestic violence calls are dangerous to respond to, and domestic violence offenders are dangerous to interact with out in the communities. And so that's just another reason why I think that we all have to take it seriously. You know, there are some people who will say, if someone's okay with that in their relationship, then why should we care? Even if you felt that way, thinking about the children who are witnessing this, the children who are more likely to suffer abuse and neglect in homes where there is domestic violence, that's a reason to care. Thinking about the increased violent behavior against law enforcement officers, that's a reason to care, because those kids, those officers, those are people who did not choose to be in this relationship.
It's very much not isolated.
Right.
Right. So it's like, yeah, he might be beating her, and we can't turn a blind eye to that, because the generational aspect comes into it, and then the present day issue of being violent towards other people.
Sure. It makes it a community problem.
Yeah, community problem indeed. And I know so I was reading online in your press release on the Greene County Prosecutor's website that you work with the Family Justice Center. Once a week, you guys are over there. You try to have a 24-hour charge rate. Walk me through that, because I know sometimes court, it's a mess. Like, I got a speeding ticket. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. And I popped into court, said, hey, what's up? It took forever to just get through the prosecutor's office. So walk us through what you guys are doing to expedite that, because I feel like if a woman comes forward and she says, hey, my husband's beating the absolute crap out of me, the court system is almost like a way to be re-victimized because it takes so long. So what are you guys doing to kind of curb down that time?
Sure. We're always concerned about re-traumatization, and so we try to take that into account. That's one of the things that's unique about our unit within the prosecutor's office is every single case, we want to have eyes on it when it comes into our office as a referral within 24 hours. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a filing decision at that point, but we at least look at it to see, do we need additional investigation? Are we ready to proceed with charges? And then we're also making referrals for services within that same 24-hour period, telling victims that the Family Justice Center is there, suggesting that they come in and find out what resources are available, checking to see if they have any questions or any needs at that time. And a lot of times that's going to be within 24 hours of the incident itself. If someone's in custody, we can review those cases. We have to do it within 24 hours. But even the ones who aren't in custody, once they come into our office, we review them really quickly to try to at least get charges and a criminal case initiated if that's where we're headed.
Yeah, because I often wonder, say she or he, I don't want to be, exclusionary, go to you guys. The violent guy finds out. I imagine it only ramps the situation up at that point at home. If there's not immediate action taken, I'm sure they'll piss him off. Oh, you went and filed charges, or you did this or that.
It can work either way. So one thing that we know about domestic abuse and about domestic violence in relationships is that it tends to cycle. So you go from a time period of tension building, then there's a violent incident, and then there's a honeymoon period. So immediately following that violent incident, there may be a time period of relative safety for a victim. One of the reasons that victims often don't want to come forward or don't want to cooperate is fear of retaliation. So that is something to take into account. But we also know that putting in place bond conditions a lot of times can modify people's behavior.
Walk us through bond conditions. What's that?
So if someone's charged with a misdemeanor or a felony in Greene County for a domestic assault, we are going to ask the court to impose bond conditions. Some of them are in every case, like obey all laws, no contact with the victim. We can put them on GPS monitoring.
Like an ankle monitor?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, really common. There are ankle monitors both for location and then also for alcohol use. If we think that there's a significant drug or alcohol abuse problem that's contributing to the domestic violence situation, we can do testing for those things. Obviously, no weapons, no ammunition.
When you say all those things, though, no weapons, no ammunition, it's just like a piece of paper. You know what I mean? Like, what are you guys doing to make sure they don't have access to that? Because it's one thing to put him in jail. He's not going to have access to it. It's another thing to go, no, you can't have a gun. And you can get a gun anywhere.
Sure. So one of the advantages is that then if that person is contacted by law enforcement and they do have a gun, that by itself isn't against the law, but now it's a violation of bond. So they could be taken back into custody for violating their bond. We don't have to wait for them to do something with the gun.
Okay.
Before it's a problem and we can get them back in custody. Sometimes the courts will order bondsmen, if they're posting a bond, to go and actually look for weapons and seize them, take them, and take control of them. Obviously, if there's a weapon used in an incident that's charged, then law enforcement is going to seize that, assuming that it's available to them.
Are they going to seize all weapons? Like a guy has 6 guns. He only used the one gun. Are they taking all 6 guns, or does he still have access to the remaining?
I'm going to give you a lawyer answer.
Okay.
It depends.
It depends. Yeah. Okay, I like it. It was just a question that popped up,
Yeah.
so I was curious in that sense. I know that you guys, or the Family Justice Center, connects people with therapy, filing for divorce, all these things. What is the preventative measures that are going into place? Because obviously if it gets to you, things are already happening. But are there preventative measures teaching women why in this situation and how to prevent it in the future and how to look for partners that aren't, doing these things?
So that's not something that the prosecutor's office is primarily responsible for. I do think that there are growing efforts out in the community to try to do healthy relationship education. Sometimes when we go to conferences and trainings, they'll talk about programs that are available for high school kids. I'm not aware of anything that's really wide-reaching here in Greene County that relates to that, but I do think that some of our nonprofit partners try to focus on some education. And really, it's something that we can all kind of do, especially when we're dealing with young people.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if Harmony House has educational tools in place as opposed to being just a safe haven.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. I'll Google it. I'll figure it out. And I know before we started rolling and recording on this, you guys said that all your prosecutors have had advanced training in domestic violence cases. Walk us through what that is so people know your knowledge is extensive.
So all of our prosecutors obviously went to law school, took the bar exam, have gone through basic prosecution training. But in the 6 months, I guess 10 months now that this unit has existed, every single one of our assistant prosecutors in our unit has gone to a national domestic violence specific training. Some of those we traveled, some we did webinars, but to really learn about best practices across the country that we could try to implement those same things here.
And do you feel like you guys are doing that, implementing better practices with the formation of this unit?
I definitely do.
Yeah. Can we talk about, and we might have touched on this a little bit, but it's in my notes, the difficulties in getting a victim to go through a charges type thing, charges that might potentially get the offender off the streets?
Well, so there are a lot of reasons why victims might choose not to cooperate. They, might be financially dependent on an abuser. They might be concerned about retaliation. They're concerned about losing their kids or not being able to care for their kids. They don't have adequate support. They might lose the location where they live. Another big element really is just this idea of hope that things can change, hope that things will get better. When we charge someone, we start to hear them making a lot of promises. I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to do drugs anymore. I'm going to get a job. I won't cheat on you anymore. I will be better with the kids. We can get married, all of those things. And
girl, don't get married to him.
Yeah, well, but I think a lot of people, and that's part of the education aspect too, is a lot of women in particular, but people in general, they want the fairy tale, And so when it's us against the world, or I only want to be with you, we don't need anybody else, just the two of us is enough. Those types of things match with romantic ideals that we see in media, but they're actually really unhealthy in relationships.
Yeah, I've always thought hopeless romantic is like kind of a toxic trait. And it sounds nice on paper, but truly it's this idea he'll pick me or she'll pick me and we'll live happily ever after. And it's garbage. You have to see people for who they are.
Right.
And sometimes they're garbage people.
Yeah. And I've been saying a lot in the last couple of weeks, and as we were talking about coming in and talking to you, teaching people don't partner with potential. Just because someone could be really great, that's not a reason to be with them now.
That might be fine if you're in your 20s and he could get a job because we're in college.
Well,
even then, though, throw the whole man out.
Yeah, you want somebody who is a good, healthy person for you to be with now.
Yeah.
And we're all growing and doing better as we age, hopefully. That's the ideal, is that we're all headed somewhere. But don't be with somebody who's bad now, hoping that they'll be good for you later.
Yeah. What is that when people tell you who they are, believe them?
Yes.
Type thing.
Yes.
Don't hold on to this idea, he'll change. He's going to therapy. He's getting so. It's garbage. Okay. Throw him out, start over, leave type thing. which is so easy to say when you're not in that situation. Because I think a lot of times people don't realize what's happening. Were you following? I'll shift here because I've been thinking about this. The Kim Kanye situation at all?
Just what's
kind of in the media, how it's like, oh, this is probably abuse on Kanye's end.
Not
I think
a ton.
back to a few years ago, this will play into my audience real well because we're a top 40 station, but how Kim was just defending Kanye and some of his behaviors with Taylor Swift. I know you love Taylor Swift over there. And I think now, man, this is like now looking back, hindsight, like an potentially abused woman defending this behavior of a man who's not being so great at home. Do you see that a lot where women will defend these men to a fault and they don't deserve to be defended because they're not a great person type thing? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of these dynamics get established where people think that if they could just be loyal enough, if they could be a good enough partner, that the abuser's behavior would change and that the situation would get better. And so that loyalty really plays into it. That, you know, they want to be the ride or die. And so they do defend that behavior. And it's strange looking at it from the outside in because I don't have an emotional attachment to that person, you know, and my home life, my situation doesn't change. And so we try to take that into account and not replace our judgment for that person's and try to keep in mind that they should have autonomy to make their own choices. But yeah, it can be frustrating when you see that.
Yeah, I would say so. You said ride or die, and it reminds me of a quote that I once heard a woman say from a homicide detective, which was, if he will verbally abuse you, he will physically abuse you. If he will physically abuse you, he will kill you type thing. Do you see that to be truth at all? Or do you deal with a lot of murders that come from these DV cases?
There are usually a few a year here, which is more obviously than we want to see. The science tells us that violent behaviors tend to escalate. And so if you've been there once, you're likely to be in that same situation or worse again. And then we also know that it's a spectrum from sort of those initial controlling, isolating behaviors. And the end of that spectrum is not even murder, it's murder-suicide.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories like that in the media over the last few years where it is a murder-suicide situation.
Yeah, that's common.
And I think one thing, we're talking about things kind of on a large scale basis that were big to the public. One story that was really captivating for a lot of reasons was the Brian Laundrie, the
Gabby Petito.
Whenever the evidence was released from that case in terms of the body cam footage from the initial response from the Utah police officers, whenever they responded to that first DV call, it seemed like at the start a very minor interaction, but when the experts were breaking it down and watching that, they were picking apart, well, here's the signs, here's the signs, here's the signs. And all domestic violence happens on a spectrum. Every case is absolutely different, and every situation is different. You can't just put it all into a formula or algorithm and say, well, if he's hit you this many times, the next time's going to be this, the next time's going to be this. We generally go off base statistics. Okay, if there's a choking involved, that's going to, increase your rate of what we call lethality.
What's lethality for people who don't know?
So the risk of serious physical injury or lethal violence.
Okay, lethal. I thought you said lethality, and I was like,
lethality.
That's on me. These years don't work.
No, excuse me. And so what the experts were pointing out was, well, while there may be a visible history between these two, you can kind of pick out some telltale signs. And you can never just predict and say, okay, let's say this guy has done X, Y, and Z. That means the next time is going to be.
There's no formula to it.
There's no formula for it. But what that case brought to light was, in any situation, there are these telltale signs where you can see that lethal violence could happen, and it's why it's so important. And we tell our law enforcement partners and our investigating agencies, treat the simple slap, shove, push just as seriously as you would, another case. You have to be looking at the whole context. You have to ask the right questions. You have to see if there's more there, because oftentimes what we're seeing from victims who are reporting is there may be an entire history of more quote-unquote serious abuse, but maybe this was the first time they were ready to call. Maybe this was the first time they were able to call. We see tons of cases, and more than I can count, of broken phones, not even having a phone, the
holes in the drywall.
Right. Mm-hmm. There are tons of 911 calls where they'll maybe get through the first 10 seconds and then it disconnects because we know the abuser's taking that phone or is aware that phone's being taken. And so you have these just incredibly complicated situations where you've got, like the title says, it's intimate partner violence, right? It happens a lot of times inside the home without any other witnesses. How do you make that 911 call when you know the person who just abused you is standing right there? How are you able to actually leave and make that report? And then if you do make a delayed report, if you finally are reporting a couple days later, well, will anyone believe you? You have to deal with all these psychological factors and factors of just the situation itself that make it so extremely difficult to actually come forward and to proceed with any help. So. 2
questions I have from that. The first being, when you see a national case like the Gabby Petito one play out, do you guys see an increase of women coming forward type thing? Like, does the public personification of cases like this make women go, oh my gosh, type thing?
I don't think that there's a correlation there. I think it's always probably beneficial when it becomes a topic of conversation just because there's a greater awareness. But as far as the calls that are coming in, I think that a lot of those decisions are being made on a really personal level as far as what's actually going on in that relationship at that time rather than something that's external. And a lot of times people just want help. They want this specific violent incident to stop. And so maybe they don't even want prosecution or anything. They just want somebody to come make that person leave or stop what's happening right now. And that, I think, is more likely why they call, why they make the reports.
My next question, you talked a bit about strangulation, and I was reading in your press release that you guys see a lot of choking and strangulation, and that according to the Training Institute of Strangulation Prevention, a single incident like this makes an abuser 750% more likely to kill their victim.
Yes.
Why is that? Do you know? It's kind of maybe out of your scope a bit with the...
Well, when you think about strangulation, and when we say strangulation, I think a lot of times people think of that as using a device or an object or something. That's going to include using hands, which is actually a lot more common. But when we talk about strangulation, we talk about choking. It makes sense that that's related to lethality because that is really one of the ultimate forms of control of another person's life. You are controlling something that they need, their airway, their access to oxygen, that can disable them in seconds. That is extremely frightening for them. So it's a great mechanism for control then for someone, but it also is taking them very near death. You are holding their life in your hands at that point. So it actually makes a lot of sense that when someone gets to that point where they're taking someone that close to death, they are controlling their very ability to breathe and live, that is related then to lethality.
And it's more common, significantly more common than not, that strangulations or chokings will not leave injury, not leave visible injury. I believe it's
really?
I believe it's 75% of chokings will not have any signs of visible injury.
That kind of surprises me because the skin's kind of thin. There's a lot of vessels there.
And if you actually look at the science behind it, it doesn't take much pressure at all to cut off somebody's airway. I think a lot of people imagine the sort of Homer Simpson, Bart Simpson as like that's what strangulation is. And
like
that's
eyes
not,
popping out very cartoon-like.
Right, and that's not what it is. And it doesn't have to be hands. It can be an arm, right, where you don't have any thumb marks, fingernail scratches, et cetera. You may have even cases where law enforcement responds to a scene, a victim reports choking and doesn't have any of that visible injury. The offender may have visible injury because she's scratching and clawing to get away from him. So all he has to say is, oh, look at me, I'm bleeding from here. And we do a lot of training and a lot of education on our law enforcement officers to look for those kind of telltale signs. Well, are we seeing defensive wounds on the offender? You know, what is happening here? And so it makes it really difficult, and it kind of goes back to that point of we have a significant amount of victims who just want to be believed, but maybe they feel like they won't because, well, I'm reporting this incident, but you know, maybe I can't see it, or it's not there, or if it's gone away by the time law enforcement responds, and it makes a difficult decision for them.
So you guys in your unit have an interesting recipe of, you kind of have a difficult job because not only may there not be evidence, you also have to have someone willing to say, I'm sick of it. I don't care if nobody believes me. He's got to be prosecuted. She's got to be prosecuted, whomever. So can you talk about the difficulty in that of combining those things. I think it's like so-and-so robbed a gas station. It's on camera. There it is. But in these cases, as you were mentioning, John, a lot of times there might not be evidence because it's only two people who see what's going on, the victim and the offender type thing. Can you talk about that added component of difficulty?
Right. And so we're looking for really any kind of corroboration we can get. Whenever we're looking at these cases, we are almost every time going to look at the 911 calls. We're going to look at photos. We're going to look at photos of the actual scene. Are there things that are thrown around? Are there things that are broken? Does the offender have any injuries like I talked about with defensive wounds? What does the 911 call sound like? There may be times when there are children present, or maybe we canvass a neighbor who may have heard something, and it can take even the slightest or smallest piece of what we call corroborating evidence that can help that. We have experts. Our law enforcement partners oftentimes have been to trainings for different kinds of things, and can talk about why we don't see injuries a lot of times in our choking cases. But what we're looking for is really any piece of evidence that can help corroborate her story. And you asked kind of another part of what makes this so difficult. When we talk about actually going to court, which is the primary focus for us, you have a right under the Constitution of confrontation. What that means in more cases than not is that we will actually have to have a victim come to court and testify, and that may be even more than once in a case. And so you've got this person that's going through this extraordinarily difficult situation, who may have different goals in the outcome. Like Emily said, they may just want this to stop one time, but then we're asking them to actually come to court, sit at a table not more than 50 feet across from their abuser, and actually have to tell what happened. And then even if they say everything that happened,
wait a damn second. What did you just tell me? Because I feel like that would be enough for women to be like, no, I'm out. I'm not going to do this garbage. And he's just going to get to go back out and keep doing what he's doing over and over and over again. Because I don't think people change too much from where they're at in those drastic situations. Like, yeah, you might change your political beliefs a little bit, this and that, but you are who you are. So you're telling me I sound aggressive. I'm not aggressive. This is just kind of blowing my mind. You're telling me that a woman who has finally worked up the strength to say, this guy's bad, he needs help, and the way I see fit, the criminal justice system is the way to help him and help me get out of this situation. You're telling me that the woman then has to sit across from him with whatever intimidating tactics he's already instilled within her and speak to him?
Absolutely.
I would be like, bye.
She's testifying before the court, and so it's either going to be a judge or a jury, right? And the hardest conversations that we have to have in this office sometimes are, one, just getting to get the confidence and get the ability and get the preparedness to be able to do that. Then they not only have to answer our questions about the incident, and there may be different trauma responses. They may not remember certain things. And then the defense attorney gets to ask them questions and grill them about why they don't remember this. Why didn't you leave? And you've got a judge and a jury going and analyzing the situation and asking all these questions too. And so you've got to tell the survivor or this victim, hey, you have to go and not only sit in front of a judge or a jury and sit basically in front of the abuser.
Make all your business publicly known.
Right.
Yep.
And then there's still a chance that they may not believe you. And even if they do, maybe he gets probation, maybe he gets back out. And your face is the same as our faces most every day at this job. I mean, it's the most frustrating thing is just, our court system is the way it is for a reason. We have a constitution for a reason.
This doesn't sound like it's set up for women.
It's not we say all the time, it is not the survivor's justice system. It is the criminal justice system. It is designed not to be easy for them. And that's why we have these services like the Family Justice Center. It's so that you may not be ready for the absolute trauma that the criminal justice system may cause, but we can still try to get you help and services that don't require those kinds of extra efforts. So that's really a big part of why these services.
Just to add an asterisk to this conversation for those watching on video, my frustration is not with you two. It's like, Emily, your thoughts, because I can see, walk us through what you're thinking right now. Because I guess I knew that in the back of my mind. You saying it though, I was like, what?
Just that it requires a lot of strength on the part of someone to come in and tell their story. And that's how I try to describe it to people. You know, it's not your job to win the case. You don't have to come in and outsmart anybody in the room. It's just telling the story. And the truth is the truth. We can't change it. I'm a good lawyer. John's a good lawyer. We can do our best legal work. But ultimately, the facts are what they are. And what we want to do is just show the judge or the jury what the truth is. And to see victims get up there and tell their stories, it requires a lot of strength. It's really inspiring because they're sharing about one of the worst things probably that ever happened to them. The abuse they've encountered in this relationship. Sometimes it's, their personal pictures. There are a lot of personal questions, all of that sort of thing. So when someone gets to the point where they're ready to do that, they're ready to hold their abuser accountable, they're ready to share that story and speak out, we admire that.
Is there a list? Like, this guy will beat your ass, don't date him.
Well, I mean, you can always case net people. That's a start. We were talking earlier about filing and reviewing cases and everything. We probably decline 60 to 70% of what we get as saying, okay, this isn't going to work to go to court. So, CaseNet's going to give you a picture of the people who are currently facing charges, people who've been convicted, but there's a whole other side of it, which are times where offenders weren't held accountable. So a lot of it is just awareness and recognizing those early signs, being aware of love bombing. Is someone too eager to start calling you their girlfriend and be in a relationship? Are they giving you gifts and making you promises and trying to move too fast in a relationship? That's a red flag. If they are isolating you, controlling you, that's a red flag. Using disrespectful language toward you, that's a red flag. All of those things will help you avoid getting real entangled with somebody who could potentially become violent.
This is wild. Yes.
Well, and I was just going to add, we are continuing to educate society, and I think we're doing a better job, as you said, of people recognizing the signs and relating to these stories, because it does happen so often. But at the same time, people oftentimes just in the court system expect the perfect victim. They want her to make all the right choices, and if there's a wrong choice, they can hold that against her, and she gets questioned about that. You have even cases where, let's say abuse happens and she leaves, she files for that divorce. She tries to get custody of the kids to get away from that situation. Well, then that is turned around on her like, oh, you're just making all this up just to get a divorce, and you want the money and the kids and all sorts of stuff. And any decision that a victim makes can also be construed in the opposite direction. Or I have had victims testify in court where they are too calm. And if this was so traumatic, well, why wouldn't she be just, all over the place? I've had the same thing where, well, she's so over dramatic that clearly there's something going on with her. You can never please everybody with the decisions a victim makes. And we have a lot of, I don't know if you'd call it naivete or just ignorance in the community about what a domestic violence victim looks like. So there's no socioeconomic factor that makes, at one person or one type of situation. It happens in all walks of life, in every kind of family, in every kind of scenario. And people have, I think, a lot of expectations for what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, when every situation is so different. And you can't just prejudge or have these pre-expectations of what's going on.
Do you think that's like a cultural thing? Because where I grew up, if a husband and wife divorced, the narrative was almost always, oh, she's crazy. There was never any shining light onto his potential flaws, whatever those may be, whether they be violent, not violent, whatever. It's always this narrative that the woman's wrong. Do you think there's a cultural aspect to the framing of a victim, in particular in this area, that we are not recognizing, or perhaps a jury might not recognize, or their own upbringing might be framing their thought?
I think that there's a lack of awareness of what those abusive behaviors do to a person's mental state. So when you are subjected to that type of abuse, you may then react in emotional ways to the abuser's behavior that then could be used to characterize you as being crazy. Yeah, because people don't see what happened in the situation that sort of got you to that point. And so are there people who are dealing with legitimate mental illness? Are there people who make false accusations? Those things exist. The statistics show it's super, super uncommon. In both instances of domestic violence and sexual violence, when people come forward and they're willing to subject themselves to what happens in the criminal justice system, overwhelmingly, they are telling the truth about what occurred. And so when we understand that, and then we also sort of give people grace for the emotional responses that they have to the difficult things that they're dealing with, I think that's the best way that we sort of counter that societal expectation or societal view that when someone has an emotional reaction, it's because there's something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wild. Yeah, the mental aspect. I think domestic violence is such a psychological game, not only from being in it, leaving it, whether you prosecute or not, you got to go to therapy, sis, type thing.
Yes. And unfortunately, there can be wait lists to get into therapy. People who don't have health insurance, people who aren't.
Therapy's expensive.
It can be. And so there are services available. The Victim Center has great therapeutic options that are available, but sometimes there's a wait for it. And that's one of the things at the Family Justice Center that, can be really good is that even if it's not true therapy, there are people there who can validate your experience, who can talk to you about how you're not alone, because even though every situation is different, there are patterns and trends that I think we can identify for people and help them understand that they are not completely unique in this. And there are other people who have experienced it. There are other people who have survived it and who have been able to thrive after overcoming it and escaping it. And then, of course, therapy is all of us can use therapy every now and again, right?
Yeah, I love therapy.
Yeah.
Keep that Grey Goo good, baby.
Yeah.
John, do you find it difficult to have victims talk to you as a man? Let me just left field this question at you.
That was a left field question. So when we talked about training earlier, we tried to talk. We try to be trauma informed, and that's something that we've been trained on is being trauma informed, trying to understand the language to use, trying to understand the body language, the behavior. I never want to go up to a victim and obviously be aggressive or talk over them or interrupt them or stand over them, right? If they're sitting down, I'm going to sit down as well. You're going to mirror their body language, mirror their responses, understand that that's a dynamic situation. I don't know if I can't speak for them to say if it's been difficult or not. I've never had somebody tell me that it was if it was difficult or not. So I don't know. What would I tell these survivors that come forward in every case and every time that I sit down and talk with them? We talk about being ready and we talk about the process, and I'm very blunt and I explain this like when you were getting frustrated earlier, this is what it's going to be like. I'm not going to cut corners and tell you and sugarcoat it and say it's going to be great. Very blunt and transparent, because what I don't want is to lie or to promise them something that I can't keep. And so a lot of transparency there, which I think they understand. And one of the first things I tell them every time is, when you are ready, I'll fight for you all the way. I'm here whenever you are ready. There's not going to be a moment where I just turn my back and say, never mind. And we have a lot of conversations with victims that they may either recant or say, I'm not going forward with this. I don't want to go forward with this. And the conversation doesn't suddenly turn hostile, and it doesn't make me angry. I understand. I try to empathize as much as I can, and we will tell them, when we are ready. If you've made 12 reports and you've recanted on everyone or not wanted to cooperate with prosecution on everyone, the 13th time we're still going to be there. It's not going to just change because, because you didn't in the past, we're not going forward this time. We'll be there when you're ready. And I think that helps bridge a lot of that trust with sort of the gender dynamics with my position.
Okay. I often wonder, like, I won't go to a male doctor type thing for the lady bits. You know what I mean? So if I was a victim of domestic violence, they said, here's your lawyer, and it's a man's name. Bye.
My hope is once they meet me, they'll understand that I'm on their side and I'm here to help them. I can't speak to if I haven't had any negative experiences on that end.
No bad Yelp reviews, right?
No bad Yelp reviews yet.
Do you guys feel like we missed anything when it comes to talking about the formation of this new unit? And to clarify, it's not really a new unit. It's just split off from a previous unit and expanded, right?
Right. It used to be that we had what we called a persons unit. And that included crimes against children, sex offenses, and domestic violence were all sort of grouped together. We've divided that out. So we're not doing work that we weren't previously doing. We're just trying to acknowledge the differences in prosecution of domestic violence offenses, the different needs of our victims, and treat those cases differently so that we can really implement those best practices.
Okay.
And I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things that we've been focusing on recently is what we call vertical prosecution. That means that there are obviously lots of court dates and lots of things that happen in a court case, but every time that there is something really substantive in court, whether it's a hearing, any kind of motions, anything on bond where we may have a victim actually appear and come to court, the attorney that is assigned to the case is trying their best to be the person that is there in court, to be that point of contact. One of the biggest complaints I think we received in the past and struggles was every time a victim would come to court, she may speak to a different prosecutor. The idea,
yeah, because there's like a bunch of you guys in there, and it's like a bunch of cases going before a judge.
And I think in our office we have
recently.
44 or 45 total. I can't say the exact number right at this minute, but different prosecutors in our office, right? And lots of people, and we have lots of cases in the hundreds for each person to deal with, and so it's very hard to split your time up. But one of the things that we are trying to do is if I am assigned to this case and there's a court hearing, I will be there. And so you know that when a victim comes to court, she knows who to look for, she knows who she's had conversations with, and we're not sort of relaying from different people, or she's meeting someone different every time. So we can try to build that relationship and that trust. That's something that we have been focusing on when creating this more dedicated unit to strictly these
familiarity
kinds of cases.
and consistency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you find that victims appreciate that? I'm guessing.
I think so. Like I said, it was one of our biggest hurdles to get over previously. I think since creating this unit, we've done a lot better job in doing that. And I think that has helped a lot. I think the relationships that I've built even so far appear to be, at least to me, more stable. The expectations are there. I'll have more calls actually seeking to talk to me, and I know that they're calling. I know what has been said to them in the past, and so they have this expectation. We're not relaying maybe two different messages or two different viewpoints. It's we all kind of are on the same page.
When you prosecute, do the women? I say women broad, but you know what? I've read through a lot of contracts, and it's me in the contract, and it says him, and I'm a girl. So I'll say women in this particular case as an overarching theme. Do you find women will return to their abuser even after he's been prosecuted? Or do
all the time? Absolutely.
Sure. I have cases, a couple that I can think of right now that I'm working on where, our defendant has previous domestic violence related convictions with that same victim, has been to prison before related to offenses committed against that same victim. So, yeah, but when you think about the ties that a lot of times people have to one another, that they are clinging to that hope, that they have children together, that they have financial ties. We have a lot of people who will say that there's a religious or cultural aspect of the concept of marriage.
Mm-hmm. The religious aspect I find to be in particular very interesting.
It can be, because it can go either way. You can have people who have really, really supportive faith communities that are helping them get through a situation like this, that are providing them resources, that are providing them support in court, that are encouraging them to get into a safe situation. And then there are other ones that aren't good about that. And so when you have people who, because of their family or because of their culture or because of, like I said, a faith community that they are involved in, that they're being told, you married this person and that's who you're supposed to be with, people do return to those relationships.
I often hear in the faith community, because I did grow up in the church, just pray for him. Pray that God will change his heart. It's like, I would rather not. Just divorce him. Throw the whole man out type thing. Do you see that?
Sometimes people will say that. I've had a lot of people lately talking about forgiveness as it relates to their involvement in the church or things that they've had pastors and things like that say to them. And like I said, it can go both ways, because a person's faith sometimes is a really strong support that they have. And they'll say, I wouldn't have been able to get through this, but for my faith and my relationship with God and through my prayer life and all of that. There are people who will say that. And then there are people who say it the opposite. And I think it's just that just prayer by itself probably isn't enough. That sometimes, you're going to pray and you're going to ask for an outcome, or you're going to ask for help in a situation, and then there's going to be sort of a response to that is you're supposed to do something. Now you need to take an action. You need to and do those things in faith. And so maybe if somebody's not doing that and they're hoping that just praying through it is going to be enough, there are other steps that they probably need to take too.
I took you down a weird rabbit hole there.
It wasn't what I was expecting,
Yeah,
but it's okay.
I'll throw you curveballs. I'll throw you guys curveballs. Okay, as we wrap this up, do you think there's anything that we missed in regards to your unit that people need to know? Maybe they thought differently of you. What did we miss?
I think the biggest thing that I hope that people gain from having these conversations is just knowing that there is a group of professionals who care so much about the people in this community and the people who are coming to us and asking for help, that we are literally doing this all day, every day. Really dedicating ourselves to learning about domestic violence, to helping victims, to providing services, to doing exceptional work in the courtroom and out. And so if they or someone who's close to them needs help, I want them to know that they can come to the Family Justice Center, that there are options available, prosecution and not, that there's confidentiality for them. So if they want to take advantage of some of the services and not others, that information doesn't get shared to the other service providers.
Harmony House.
Yes.
What's all in the Family Justice Center? So people know, hey, this isn't just like yes, they did create a domestic violence unit. You guys are there. But at the Family Justice Center, we can help you in a variety of other ways.
It's going to be law enforcement, Harmony House, the Victim Center, Borough Behavioral Health, the Children's Division. I know I'm going to leave somebody out. What am I forgetting?
Legal aid.
Legal services is there for assistance for people who can't afford counsel but need to do a child custody thing, a paternity action, a divorce, any of those things. But then also, maybe most importantly, are the navigators who are there, who get assigned to help walk someone through the system. Because if there's a service you need that's not in our center, they will connect you with it.
Okay. Is there a number people can call that you would know?
I don't know the number.
That's okay. Here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
As we conclude this, I will link all of your information for the domestic violence unit here in Greene County, along with information for the Family Justice Center at 929thebeat.com. Emily, John, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.